High Commissioner of India, Her Excellency Mrs Ruchi Ghanshyam, Ashok Chauhan ji, MBE, Warrant Officer, Deputy Director, Nehru Centre, Mr. Brij Gohare, esteemed panelists, and ladies and gentlemen of the audience. A very, very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Inspiring Indian Women, a not-for-profit organization that aims to bring together women from all over the world under one platform so that they can work together towards bigger goals and collaborate to create opportunities and achieve their ambitions. Thank you all for joining us here today for a discussion on women, leadership and power. A subject that needs to be discussed today with even more fervor, drive and intent than ever before, because women's leadership matters. It boosts not just the economy, but also society as a whole. And yet we see that despite comprising nearly half of the workforce, women account for less than a quarter of senior roles globally, and only 5% of global CEOs. The aim of today's discussion is to get the views and perspectives of our panelists and to hear more about their journeys so that each one of us can apply relevant insights in order to become the leaders that we can look up to and make our mark. On that note, I'd like to request Rashmi Mishra to please welcome and felicitate our respected chief guest, Her Excellency Mrs Ruchi Ghanshyam. Mrs. Ghanshyam, we are honored to have you with us today, and what better person to talk about women's leadership and power than you. So if you can give us a few words of wisdom, we look forward to that.
This organization, one of the things that really struck me was the motto of this organization, which I have here, and it says, "I am the inspiration, I am the catalyst which runs the world. This whole human race is because of us. You are because I am." Now, of course, that's correct. The last part of it is really correct. You are because I am, because if there was no woman, there would be no creation. But I'm reminded, because my last posting was to South Africa, and there is a saying in South Africa, they call it Ubuntu. I am because we are. So I thought to myself, it's true that women need to remind themselves that the world is there because we are. Because often women tend to underestimate themselves or not to value themselves enough. And often also the society forgets to value the women. So it's important that women should remind themselves of their own worth, of their own value, of their own inner strength. But it is also important for women to remember, and I hold this view, that the world exists in balance between men and women. We don't create alone, we create with men. So just as it's important for the male section of the society not to underestimate the value of womanhood, it's also important for us to value the strength and the help that we receive from whether it's our fathers, our brothers, our husbands, our children, boys. Since I live in a family of 3 men, so I'm very particular about not forgetting how much we love the men in our lives.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. That was absolutely wonderful. I think we can all say here that we feel absolutely charged and inspired, and if any of you had a shadow of a doubt, it's clearly dispelled now. On this note, since we're all charged up and we are ready to go, I'd like to invite on stage 3 wonderful ladies, Gaurika Mathur, Chinu Kishore and Sutapa Biswas, for a short Odissi dance where they're going to be showing the power or Shakti of a woman. So please join me in welcoming these 3 ladies as they do their Odissi dance. warm welcome to all of you and a massive thank you for joining us today. I know you all have very busy schedules, so we really appreciate that. Carol, I'm going to get straight into the thick of things and not target you, but yes. You're a successful entrepreneur, you are a public speaker, you're an executive consultant, best-selling author, but all this hasn't happened overnight, has it? So run us through your journey and tell us a little bit of how you started and where you've come to where you have.
Okay, no, nothing happens overnight to anybody, male or men or women, it doesn't make any difference. My journey started in the late 1980s when I set up a stress consultancy, and I decided then that looking after people, trying to make a difference, working with people was exactly my passion. And I think that working in industry, as we as an organisation do, we work with organisations who want to try to manage stress, and we also provide counselling services to them. What makes one become a successful entrepreneur is not necessarily the word. What it takes is commitment, dedication and motivation. Nothing happens overnight. When people say to me, Carol, how did you get onto the BBC? How come you are an entrepreneur? It's because of some simple words: hard work, commitment, dedication, anything along those lines, which is a person has to feel they want to live their passion. And first of all, you need to know what your passion is. So if you know what your passion is, then you've got a chance then of actually moving on to the next stage, which is making sure other people know what your passion is. So one has to be a driver, you have to get up in the morning, be a self-starter. Not every day when you wake up in the morning do you feel like it, but as an entrepreneur you have to feel like it. You make mistakes, we all make mistakes, and when you make mistakes you need to know how to pick yourself up, be resilient, dust yourself down and get on with it. And I see a lot of nodding heads in the audience. So it doesn't all just happen. You just have to hold on to your belief, hold on to your vision and make sure that's where you want to be, that's where you want to go, and nothing is going to get in your way.
Moment, and as you say, nodding heads, because it chimes so well that with things we know we have to do, but somehow we forget doing it in the rut of life. I think it's also very interesting because it segues quite neatly into one of the things that Rohini, you have talked about and had a lot of workshops on, which is creating your own breakthrough. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how does it really work? What do you mean by creating your own breakthrough?
So what do I mean by creating your own breakthrough? I think, following on from what Carol was saying, is that we all have something unique in us. Every one of us is unique. And even though we've been through an education system that makes us not believe that we're unique, we're all trying to conform to a standard, we're trying to get through certain tests and we're trying to be like everybody else. But if you actually go back to basics and you try to discover what makes you unique, that will usually be a combination of what are the things that make you happy, what do you love doing, even if nobody paid you to do it, so your passion, but also what are you really good at? And this kind of goes beyond what you would put on your CV. I would say there could be mundane things, like you could be really good at decluttering. I mean, I don't know how many of you have tried spring cleaning. I hate it because it's so hard to declutter, but there are some people who actually make a living out of it. So I think it's simple things like that you may discover that you do that actually not many people can do. And finally, I think discovering what your core beliefs and values are. And very often these may be different to what society tells us our beliefs and values should be. And I think when we've taken a bit of time to discover what makes us unique, then I think there's a chance that we discover how we're meant to contribute to this world. And I think that's when the magic happens and you feel that you can make a breakthrough.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think it's, you're talking about finding your passion, you're talking about discovering your uniqueness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can always make a breakthrough, and there are still potentially obstacles. So I want to now come to you, Deep, on this, and say, talking about obstacles, talking about, we know that it's not easy. What, in your opinion, is the reason? Why do you think so many women aren't in positions of leadership as compared to men? What do you think needs to change?
Well, first of all, a very good evening to you all, and good evening to you all out there. I think that listening to you both, one of the key things that possibly needs to change is the attitude men, and a lot of men have, towards women. One of the key things you can say is a lady, for example, may go for a position in the RAF or perhaps in the Indian Army or something, and the first thing a man would go, how can you pick up a gun? How can you do this? No, forget it. And so the mind is made up before you've even gone through. But I want to take it one step further back than that. If our own women, if you look at the mothers as well for a start off, and you look at them and you think, hang on, if they're bringing up their own daughters to actually think that your main area in life is to perhaps bear children or learn how to cook and clean, then the whole attitude from the childhood needs to change. That no, the inspiration that your brother can do, or the inspiration that your father has done, why can't you do it? Why do you have to suddenly think, well, I tell you what, I'll let him do that and I'll just sit at home. Why should you sit at home? The moment that attitude has changed, then I think we have a clearer understanding and a clearer platform level for both men and women to actually challenge each other, and that challenge can actually create an inspiration.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I think we need to understand that the whole approach towards this is collaborative. I think, Your Excellency, you said that as well. Nothing happens in isolation, and we need to work towards it as a society to make this work. Lakshmi, I want to bring you in here. You, as the representative of CII in the UK, work with both British and Indian companies, and I know it's very easy to say, oh, perhaps it's an Asian mindset, and perhaps it's a demographic thing. But I want to ask you, in your experience, you've seen some numbers which are quite telling. And I wonder if you want to shed some light on your experiences and observations on that.
So, thank you, Mridula. I think this has become this year my favorite topic to talk about. And actually, some time back on the Women's Day, Her Excellency hosted a program and we talked about women in leadership. I will actually start with sharing a quick statistic with you. So recently we launched the Grant Thornton and CII India Meets Britain tracker, and since last year we started tracking what the percentage of women on boards of companies is in the UK, and I'm delighted to say that it has grown since last year. It's nowhere near perfect, but it's 23% women are represented on the boards of Indian companies here, which is actually more than the global average, which global average sits around the 13 or the 17% mark. So it's slightly more than what the global average is. Now you'd think that that does not make sense. Whenever you have, big sort of meetings and things, you only see men. And I'm actually guilty of being surrounded by men all the time. And I even joke that I feel like a man today. But the thing is, again, what you talked about, Deep, is about stereotyping. And we are very quick to stereotyping in our own heads. That, right, because I'm thinking this, I need to also think of this, this and this. You will not think of your role as in isolation of the entire ecosystem of work and responsibilities that you have. And there is nothing wrong with doing that. Absolutely nothing wrong in doing that, as long as both genders think of it in that manner. And that reflects in Indian companies as well as British companies, as well as US companies or global companies. I will actually share also a very, very sad statistic. So US does not have maternity leave, right? A friend and a colleague of mine is struggling currently. She's on a 12-week maternity break and that is categorized as a handicap something, a disability leave. It's not even proper maternity leave. So when we're talking about and quick to thinking that Indian companies are guilty of doing this and that and whatever, you need to actually reflect on what the world is doing right now. Disability leave, really? And there is no question of a paternity leave, because that is obviously out of question. You're disabled because you've just given birth. But what about your male counterpart? What about the partner who's actually also delivered that baby? So, I mean, just on that statistic, Indian companies are doing well. A lot of tech companies in India actually have made sure that there are creches on campus and they recruit both husbands and wives, right? Why are they doing that? So as to retain both husband and wife into the career stream, and for them to ensure that while they enjoy their family life, they're able to also actually pursue their career. Thank you. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you for that, Lakshmi. I completely agree. It's staggering to hear that. And also I read somewhere something that talked about a paternal reward, but maternal guilt. And it's almost like, oh, you're a dad now, and that's fantastic, and oh, you're a mum now. Oh, right, okay, how is that going to impact work? And stereotypes and things that we have to work around. So all very, very important topics. I want to now sort of look at narrowing down on a couple of things, because we know that on a one-on-one basis, women are incredibly articulate, confident, powerful, empowered, and yet when it comes to the subject, when they move towards the leadership area, they're almost apologetic for wanting a raise or asking for additional resource or indeed asking for an assignment that is challenging. Carol, I know you've done a lot of work on that and you have some very strong views on that. What have your findings been and what has your experience shown?
An interesting question. I work with a lot of women as a public speaker coach. And what I've seen over the years, the women that have actually approached me are women who actually want to raise their heads above the parapet. These are women who actually want to get to the point where they're seen, they're heard, and they are remembered. And the only way that we as women are going to raise our heads above the parapet is by speaking out. It's speaking up and speaking out. Speaking clearly, saying what we want to say, being focused, and actually saying what we think is the most important things. And I think public speaking, there can be nothing more important than to raise your voice, say who you are, and actually to express yourself. Because only when you actually do that will people actually start listening to you. So you may be sitting in the audience now thinking to yourself, I've got so many things to say, but I can't put my hand up and say it. I'm going to say, stand up, say your name, and say what you want to ask. Because then we'll actually know who you are. Translate that into the big wide world, and if we're doing that, then people will know who we are. So if you want to become a leader could be of a team, it could be a leader in your home. You haven't got to necessarily be a CEO to be a leader. You haven't got to necessarily aspire to be a CEO. Not everybody wants to be, but you can still have leadership qualities. And some of the leadership qualities is to make sure you can bounce back from setbacks, because they do happen. And when they happen, pick yourself up and get yourself up there and dust yourself down and get yourself up there again. But also the public speaking. There can really be nothing more important than actually saying what is it you want to say, saying it clearly to everybody, and making sure everybody listens to you and that you have a voice.
Thank you for that, Carol. That's absolutely right. I think one of the most important things that we see is that women are so focused on perfection. We seem to be raised to not ever want to face failure. And that's a complete impossibility. You have to face failure. So it's not just about resilience, but it's also about saying, if I'm not good enough, I'm not even going to show up. And no wonder then that we've got the numbers that we've got, because you don't even apply for that job, because you think, you know what, I don't have the skills that are needed. I don't have 10 out of 10. Now, that's the sort of thing, Rohini, I know you've been thinking about and talking about, which is this focus on perfection, but actually we should be thinking about progress over perfection. What are your thoughts on that, and how can women actually do that? What are the steps they can take?
So I think chase progress, not perfection, is kind of my strap line that I always talk about to clients and just to my children as well, and to anyone who wants to listen. And the reason that's important is because perfection is such a subjective thing. You know, what's perfect to you today, chances are by the time you get there, it won't be perfect anymore. It's such a moving goalpost that actually if you wait for something to be perfect, that will probably be never. So what's the point of that? So I think the way I think about it is that, you know, if you've got an idea, if you have a passion, then just go for it. You know, take that first step, even if it's not exactly as you would like. At least you've made progress, and then keep going. And I think to Carol's point, and you know some of the other points that we made earlier, that actually failure is just a process in which you learn. So there's no shame in, you know, getting something wrong. And I think the minute you take that perfection mindset and replace with a progress mindset, it's very liberating. You know, you're no longer beating yourself up because you didn't meet a certain standard, but at the same time you're making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your experience as a coach, Rohini, have you seen that this quest for perfection, it transcends cultures, doesn't it?
It transcends cultures, it transcends genders. You know, I recently had a client of mine who wanted to change careers from, you know, being a science graduate working in a healthcare PR company to actually going into a career where he could draw, because he loved drawing. And he didn't know where to begin because it was such a big leap, you know, from science to completely going into art. And I think one of the things he realized early on when we were working together is that the reason he wasn't even willing to put his work out because he didn't think it was perfect. To me, it was absolutely amazing. Like, what are you talking about? You know, it's beautiful. Just put it out there. And I think when he got confident enough to just put it out there, and then he saw that the response was really good, that made him feel like maybe it's good enough. And actually, what we need in life is not perfection. We just need things that are good enough. You know, if it's good enough, that's good enough.
Thank you for that, Rohini. That absolutely makes sense, and it's something, again, these are the things we know, but somehow we just seem to forget to implement them in our lives. Actually, I want to come back to you. You've obviously worn many hats as well in different lifetimes. And one of the things that you've worked extensively with MPs, you know the inside out of that. People have an impression that when we talk about these issues, we're talking about the corporate sector, about the private sector. How different is it in the public sector and in government?
Well, it's difficult to answer that. It's the same. It's the same in the household, it's the same everywhere. What I witness inside a boardroom, I'd witness in the parliament, in the middle of fellow councillors, or, you know, with parliamentarians or with assistants of parliamentarians. But I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with some of the most amazing people in Parliament in the UK. My former boss, I've seen assistants to MPs holding a diary and standing at the back. I don't remember even one time where I've actually sat at the back. I've always been sat right next to him. And some of you would remember remember me from my role with Bob when I used to work with him. You've always seen me stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Why did that happen? Because he was not one of those men who did not feel comfortable or confident if their assistant or their junior or their mentee was standing actually right next to them. He's always been very, very facilitated. I've worked with many men in my entire career journey. I think I've worked with more men than women who have been very, very encouraging like that. But the important thing is also to know what you want to do. And it's not about somebody else. It's not somebody else's journey. It's not their story, it's yours. I recently lost a teacher of mine, and she used to say to me when I was very, very young, I was a very confused child. I wanted to study everything. I wanted a mix of everything. I wanted geography, I wanted history, and I wanted science and biology, and I wanted psychology. And that was not possible. Not in high school, not in junior school. So she said to me, what has actually stayed with me forever and has actually turned into my life story. She said that instead of thinking about it as failures, think of it as your life being transplanted. You're being transplanted from one thing to the other, and that's how you will grow. Each time you're transplanted from one to the other field, if you like, you will grow. And that has been my journey. I'll quickly summarize with a small story that I like to tell a lot of women that I meet. In my current role recently, our counterparts, Confederation of British Industry, their latest sort of president is the chairman of Tesco's. And the head of Tata Group was our chairman of the India Business Forum. And he said to me that, look, there's a new president there, they'd like to have a photo op with you, they'd like to meet, and let's do this picture together. I said, fine, I will make time, there's this time, and David, I and John, we had a picture together, all over social media, everything. I actually came back to my desk and I sat down. I needed to sit down for 5 minutes and smile. And I was smiling, and my colleague who works with me, she looked at me and she said, what is wrong with you? I said, nothing is wrong with me. Not so long ago, I must have applied at every single aisle of Tesco, right? The meat aisle, the garbage cleaner, whatever. I did not get a job at Tesco. And here's the chairman of Tesco wanting to take a picture with me. And at that time, I remember tearing up my actual CV and writing it up as an admin CV. And that's how I landed with Bob in the first place. And I stopped believing in what was my core skill, my experience. I've done extensive work in my past, but I tore it all up and wrote up a small admin CV and said, fine, this is good enough now for this country maybe. And I will probably get a job now, maybe as a steno or a secretary or something. And I did a lot of things. But that story I like to say because what has changed? Nothing has changed. I haven't changed, but it's all what stayed here, and what stayed here has helped me get to where I am today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Lakshmi. It's one of the things that all of us, but also the audience really value, is to hear the journey and the stories of how you all have got to where you have. And it's all been, as you say, hard work, Carol, as you say, pursuing that dream, but actually sometimes knowing what that vision is, as you were saying, because sometimes we have it in our head and we just are not able to articulate it. You need to be able to articulate it in the lift for 30 seconds. I used to have a boss who said, you need to have a 30-second pitch. And for a person like me, who just cannot stop talking, it is a nightmare. And I was saying, I cannot do a 30-second pitch. He said, well, you know, you're going to lose your chance because people have only 30 seconds in the lift. And if you can grab them then, you've got your chance. So, yeah, keep your 30-second pitch ready, guys. Lakshmi, you talked about it, and I know, ma'am, you talked about it earlier, about having ambassadors and having champions as your male colleagues or bosses or mentors who stood there and actually said, I'm going to go that extra mile, I'm going to put my neck on line for you. Have you seen instances? How does it work? It's proven that when men are invested and engaged, not just from the top, but as colleagues and peers, that women progress much, much further. Have you seen instances of that, where, in your career and as you've grown through?
Well, that's a lovely question. I think that that has happened, and I think that's happened a lot in the political sphere. If you look at, or if you take, shall we say, the political sphere, where say Mrs Thatcher, for example, at the time had a lot of opposition, she had a lot of men to work with, and she had to literally use her instincts and charm as a woman to really not only manipulate them to her way of thinking, but actually get the job done. And I think a lot of what has happened is a lot of women have inspired that way and thought, hang on, if I've got to get something done, if I'm going to rely on a bunch of blokes and a bunch of men, I'm never going to get anywhere, am I? It's about time I told them what's right and what's going on. And I think that the more that has happened in a lot of high up CEO or management positions, the more I think not only men have worked better and smarter, but I think they've actually learned on both sides to come together and work together, and not just feel, well, I'm not taking orders from a woman. Those days are gone. And you don't need, as Lakshmi was saying, disabled this, or you've got to listen to this. It's just realising that the way our attitudes are changing, and the way men's attitudes are changing a lot faster, because there's a lot of women in those positions making sure that things are going to get done the right and proper way. So yes, to answer your question, I think that is true. There is a lot more women inspiring men now, rather than just men trying to be the beacons and the boss, and the lady just happening to get the job. It's the other way around a lot of the time.
That's exactly what we want to hear here. On that note, can I ask you, who you talk about Margaret Thatcher, but is there any particular woman who stands out for you in terms of being an inspiring leader? I'm going to come to the definition of leader, but someone who inspires you as a woman who stands out for you. Is there anyone that you can talk about?
I think you might think this is a complete political answer, but it isn't. I think all women inspire me and a lot of men in our offices, because one of the key things that women do is they don't give up. And they will keep banging on those doors, and they will keep knocking on those doors, and they will keep presenting that programme, and they will keep, making sure things are done until it's right. And a lot of men would get to a point where they say, well, look, I've done it 3 times, I can't do it again. And they'll look at a woman, and a woman will go, no, I don't care, I will keep doing it 6 times, I'll knock on that door, I will get to that position, I'll keep banging on those doors, I'll keep phoning that person. And I think all women in that sense have inspired me, and a lot of my team who are men have turned around and said, look, I can't do this, we'll ask her, because she does it. We're all right behind the woman. They say behind every successful man there's a woman. I think it's standing beside every successful man is a woman, probably egging him on, saying, well, I told you, I did that.
That was a politically correct answer, but we'll take it. No, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it's an intrinsic woman's nature as well, isn't it, of not giving up, of doggedly persisting. So definitely something that we live by, but need to do more of. We've all touched upon bits of leadership. Carol, I know you talked about, it doesn't have to be a CEO. And really, I want to throw this to all of you for your views. But it's clearly time to redefine leadership, isn't it? Because people think that, oh, I need to be an MD, and if I'm not successful. So it would be really wonderful to hear a little bit from you all on your views of what is leadership. Is it time to redefine it? And the second question I want to ask you is, do women have to do power in the same way as men? Why at all do we need to make a comparison of sort of female leaders or power, as it were? So if I leave that for all of you to give me a little bit of your insights on that, would be fantastic.
Okay, let's do leadership first. Now, I don't think you need to be a CEO. Not everybody wants to be a CEO. But I think in some ways the word leadership is about getting people on your side, getting people to follow you. So if you have a vision, if you have a passion, if you have a belief, that's just the point. You can't necessarily do it by yourself. We know that one voice is very strong, but nevertheless we see throughout history that one person leads, other people need to follow to be with that person. You can't be a general of an army and have no followers. So therefore leadership actually comes from within. It's something that's quite unique. Can it be taught? Yes, it can be, but not everybody wants to be a leader. Not everybody always has to aspire to be a leader. Some people are born more as followers, and that's fine. And some people have this innate skill of actually wanting to be a leader. And sometimes you see children in the playground at 5 years old, and you can see who they're going to be further down the line. So watch that child, watch that child. So you actually see it there, and it's very refreshing to see it. Now, nobody's taught that child of 5 to be a leader, but it comes naturally to them, and that's a joy. So if it comes naturally to you, use the skill. Use it and actually use it and bring other people on your side. It's a wonderful skill to have, but if it comes more easily for you to be a follower, that's fine. It doesn't matter, because I think this sort of demarcation line between leadership and followers, we're all working together as one team. All working together. You can't just have followers, you have to have the leaders. You can't have just leaders, you have the leaders and followers. So realistically, I think that's really the most important. And can leadership be taught? Well, it can be, but for some people it just comes naturally.
Thank you, Carol. Pete, would you like to say something on that?
I think a lot of what Carol said I'll agree with in that sense, that you don't have to be the leader to be a leader. You can be part of a team and be a leader. I think one of the key things that leadership is about, in my opinion, is when you're in a team and if something goes wrong or something is not right with one of them, somebody who possibly isn't the leader turns around and says, I'll help you, I will make that change, or gives other people a chance. Or watching, and leadership to me is all about inspiration. And if your leader inspires you, then you will also inspire from them. And to be able to have a leader to sit back and say, I got that person to do that, and sit back and think, wow, when they came into my office, they were just scared gutless, and now look at them, they're leading their own team, they're taking their own wing. And particularly if women can do it a lot more, where they might have thought, I don't think in 10 years' time I'll even have a job, and in 10 years' time they're actually taking a whole team on and transforming it. To me, and I think a lot of people, that is a big inspiration for leadership. But I'll just say this as well, that when it comes to inspiration and when it comes to leadership, there's nothing like your own home and your background to actually have what you're taught. If you're taught that, look, this is who you are, and that's all you're going to end up, a lot of the time you're going to stay like that. But if somebody says, well, you did very well in that test, but what if you could get 10% more? And that 10% more can make you think when you're making a decision, can I push it a little further? And it's all in us. It's a matter of tapping that potential. And the more women get a chance to do that, the more the way of the economy, the way the businesses are run, the way radio shows are done, the way TV programs are done, the way we're all sitting here today. Maybe 50 years ago you wouldn't have thought of it. But look, Asian people sitting, talking about leadership. I remember when my parents first came, we were lucky to get a job. So yes, leadership is all over in that sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I want to then ask Lakshmi and Rohini about the second bit I talked about, which is this whole power thing. Why do we have to do power the way men do? Does there need to be a comparison? And is it more about, I was reading an article that talked about power with rather than power over. Any thoughts on that?
Actually, men don't do power. Men actually don't do power. We think they do, but they don't do power. Women try to do power, and they sometimes don't do very well because they're trying too hard. The problem is when you're trying too hard, when you're not comfortable being who you are, and when you're not comfortable being how you are, and when you're not comfortable understanding that to get to a certain point B, you need to add certain skills to it, you need to add certain attitude to it, you need to add certain self-confidence to it. So we don't have to do power, you're powerful because you are. Now, I will actually just quickly respond to something that you guys have reflected on, Deep and Carol. The thing about leadership is, again, yes, there is an innate sense of behavioral leadership, but the point is also around positive role modeling. And while we reflect on leader or follower, actually let's park that conversation for a second and understand that each one of us, every single one of us, has the power to influence change. And that's the kind of power that is inside of you, every single one of us, not even one exception here. every single person in this room has someone following them or watching them. You know, just by way of watching you, somebody else is feeling, wow, I mean, I wish I could sit in the Nehru Centre here. You know, I wish I could actually come up to this place and listen to these guys. A lot of people are not even able to get to that step A that you think was fairly easy. Getting on a bus or a train and coming to a certain point is also, it requires power, right? For a lot of people, that is not happening. So remember that every single one of us has the ability to influence that change in somebody else. Your journey is different from somebody else's, but it's also similar. So just because you're wearing business suits and, you know, wearing stilettos and high heels does not make you powerful. Just because you're shouting down at somebody does not make you powerful. You're powerful when you're able to say to your colleague, well, I'd like you to become much more successful than I am. I'd like to, you know, see you grow beyond where I've grown. I'd like to see you earn way more than I do. That's power, right? That's power because you're not insecure. You're saying, I've gone to point B, but I'd like to see you go way, way, way beyond and to get to the right to the top. That's power.
I couldn't agree more, and I think coming to that point, Rohini, maybe I'd like you to answer or rather comment on taking that point about insecurity, because that's so vital. If you're secure in your own skin, you really want your team around you to thrive, and as you say, getting that 10% more, you actually want to encourage that. So I think there's something about, you know, we obviously need to collaborate to work, but there is a very, very it's really important to have women supporting women. And I think what you see is that at junior levels you find the sort of male role model, but as you become more and more senior, you actually look for a female sponsor or a female mentor. You look for someone you want to role model, and I think that is increasingly becoming more and more important. So where men are sort of buddies and say, well, let's have a pint and have a chat about it, but women are coming more to terms with that. And what has your experience been, Rohini, in terms of looking at the power of women's networks? How important is it to have those networks?
I think for me, networking should be about collaboration. It's about finding complementary skills. It's less about, I mean, I have this theory, you know, I'm not great with networking, I have to be honest. You know, I don't like the atmosphere where you go in and you have a 30-second pitch and you exchange business cards, because it's not a meaningful connection. You know, you're not going to remember 90% of the people you met, they're not going to remember you. And so for me, it's more about reciprocity in a network. So, you know, I do something kind for you, you don't have to feel obliged to do it back to me. But if you could do something kind for maybe one other person or two other people, and then each person does that for forevermore, and you can just imagine what an amazing network effect that would create. So for me, I think, you know, to your earlier point about collaboration, I'm a huge believer that collaboration is win-win. Competition is zero-sum. So, you know, any day, I think if you can collaborate, if you can actually find people who have something that you don't have, but together you create something more amazing, then that's worth having. And that doesn't just go from, you know, women to women. I'm you know, in my journey, I think my greatest personal champion was my husband. You know, and if it wasn't for my husband's belief in me, and a bit like you, Lakshmi, I struggled. I spent years temping, doing filing and photocopying, because people did not recognize the qualifications I came to India with. But I learned a huge amount, and I wouldn't change it for the world, because it was like the best kind of education that you couldn't pay good money. You don't get a university of life where you go and learn, you know, British culture, British humour, all these kind of things that actually then, you know, the point you made about networking, going out for drinks with the boys, you know, those things are not natural to us as women. But if you're an Indian woman and you've got children, chances are you're going to feel increasingly uncomfortable, you know, going out with the boys and, you know, trying to network in that way. But I think understanding that's how the culture works gives you a little bit of an edge on how to do something else that gets you remembered or recognized. You don't have to follow what other people do. but just find your own way.
Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you very much to Carol Sears, Deep Raja, Lakshmi, and Rathore, Mrs. Rohini Rathore, and our Mridula Kaul, who handled the show very well.